Baptizing Psychoanalysis. This phrase came to mind as I was getting prepared to record this video here. And I want to, in that vein, introduce a philosophical association that I'm joining, another YouTuber that kind of operates in this space. There's not a whole lot of us. Telos Bound, I've had a conversation with him. It's started kind of a philosophical association where this idea of kind of baptizing philosophy is one of the tenets there. It's still kind of being created. Some interesting folks that are part of it, and I'm happy to kind of join them there. So I wanted to share this reading from Lacan here in this sense, right? I want to share this reading from Lacan's Écrit, which is his book. In the chapters entitled "The Freudian Thing," and a section entitled "The Adversary." And in this line of baptizing psychoanalysis, I wanted to think of the words, Christ's words, "The truth shall set you free," in the context of psychoanalysis, right? Specifically, Lacan's reading of Freud is interesting in terms of, my contention will be here loosely that Freud opened the door from the psychoanalytic perspective here for the logos to reemerge within the psyche, which sounds crazy. But Lacan says here, Freud's discovery calls truth into question, right? So the space of the logos is now open to be explored again. Freud's discovery calls truth into question, and there is no one who is not personally concerned by truth. Now, of course, Freud and Lacan were both stated atheists. That's why I think this makes it all the more interesting to explore this way. Something like the real understanding of the truth of Christ is something that can bridge the gap in the modern psyche, and there can be a reciprocal relationship of healing for those that are so far gone to ever consider something like Christianity true, which I get, because a lot of the Christianity that we were all brought up in it was been extremely corrupted by this world. Now, Christianity itself, Christ cannot be corrupted, but our human understanding and engaging with something like the Logos is difficult in a fallen world, and we live in a fallen world. And I would put to you that both psychoanalysis and Christianity start at the position that the world that we live in is filled with illusions, filled with images and fantasies. And within this fallen world, within this unconscious part of our psyche, of our subjectivity, our ego, right? We are subject to forces that we don't understand and we can't articulate, because they are, again, in the darkness. They are in the unconscious. And both, again, psychoanalysis and Christianity, at least from Lacan's perspective here in terms of psychoanalysis, it is the truth that shall set you free. It is the truth that shall liberate one from a psychoanalytic perspective from the neurotic, obsessive tendencies that brings one into psychoanalysis, which, may I add, is growing and magnifying tremendously here in 2022, right? So is it possible to wed the Logos with psychoanalysis in a meaningful way and bridge the gap between this secular and secular atheistic domain with a more ancient originating understanding of the truth of Christ, right? Broad questions here. And again, just opening this up for exploration and celebrating this association, this partnership here. So I'm going to start reading here. Again, this is Lacan from his Écrit, the Freudian Thing, and he's addressing his adversaries. His adversaries are those in the psychoanalytic milieu of the time, mid-20th century, that were moving more towards a kind of ego psychology, more towards kind of like this medicalization of the self, of the ego, of the subject, and the therapies that come with it. And there was a tendency at this time, obviously, behaviorism, positivism, all of this was completely discarded of something like the truth. And he even mentions it here, right? So for someone like Lacan in this French milieu to say that we need to return towards something like the truth, and it is the truth in analysis that sets the patient free, is, I think, it's remarkable and interesting, even if Lacan himself was playing a bit of the fool here. So, but anyways, bear with me here. Maybe I'll chime in a bit as we read, and you'll see how Some of Lacan's prose is known for being a little abstract, but let's see here. So he says, "I'm sure of my answer here. Absolutely not." He puts in quotes, assuming that what I am going to say is as it should be. He says, "The meaning of a return to Freud is a return to Freud's meaning. And the meaning of what Freud said may be conveyed to anyone because and the meaning of what Freud said may be conveyed to anyone because while addressed to everyone, it concerns each person. One word suffices to make this point. Freud's discovery calls truth into question, and there is no one who is not personally concerned with the truth. It must seem rather odd that I should be flinging this word in your faces, the truth, a word of almost ill repute, a word banished from polite society." Lacan continues, "But isn't it inscribed in the very heart of analytic practice, the truth that is? Since this practice is constantly rediscovering the power of truth in ourselves and in our very flesh? Why, indeed," Lacan continues, "would the unconscious be more worthy of being recognized than the defenses that oppose it in the subject?" So he's saying, if there was not something like the truth, then why would we be exploring the unconscious, the darkness, in search for the salve, the relieving factor, which is truthful speech, the healing factor, which is truthful speech? So, in the intellectual, psychic sense, articulating, speaking truthfully, right? There's this distinction Lacan has between empty speech, which is like the speech of Das Man from a Heideggerian perspective, the speech of the everyday, which is again tied up in this illusory world, right, that builds up our sense of self, our ego. But in analysis, we explore the unconscious, right? We're shining a light in the darkness through whether it's free association, another Freudian notion that Lacan speaks about in a positive light here, or whatever it is. There is this phenomenon, you can almost scientifically verify it, that in this truthful speech actually providing and engendering well-being for the patient that experiences it. So again, he says, why indeed would the unconscious be more worthy of being recognized than the defenses that oppose it in the subject, so successfully that the defenses seem no less real than it? I am not reviving here the shoddy Nietzschean notion of the lie of life, nor am I marveling at the fact that one believes, nor do I accept that to will something one need but want it badly enough. But I am asking where the peace that ensues and recognizing an unconscious tendency comes from, if the latter is not truer than what restrained it in the conflict, right? So where does this peace that comes upon the analysand, right? Where does it come from? And how does it not show us that the truth shall set you free in terms of reaching a state of well-being, a state of more well-being than previously, when you were embroiled and entrenched in these false conceptions, which are rooted in, with desire, and the desire is always the desire of the other. So there's a lot that goes in here, and I've done several videos talking about Lacan and his work and in terms of desire here, but let me continue here. He says, for some time now, this peace has, moreover, been quickly proving illusory. For psychoanalysts, not content to recognize as unconscious the defenses to be attributed to the ego, have increasingly identified the defense mechanisms, displacement of the object, turning back against the subject, regression of form, with the very dynamic that Freud analyzed in the tendency, which thus seems to persist in the defenses with no more than a change of sign. Haven't people gone too far when they submit that the drive itself may be made conscious by the defense so that the subject won't recognize himself in it? In order to try to explain these mysteries in a coherent discourse, Lacan continues, I am, in spite of myself, using words that reestablish in the discourse the very duality that sustains them. But what I deplore is not that one cannot see the forest of the theory for the trees of the technique employed, but rather that it would take so little to believe that one is in the body forest, precisely because of the following notion, which is hiding behind each tree, namely, that there must be some trees that are truer than others, or if you prefer, that not all trees are bandits. right? You think of trees as associations or meanings or notions or understandings of the self, right? There are truer understandings of the self, and there are less true understandings of the self. And we, again, are swimming in a false sense of the truth of our sense of self. And again, the process of analysis is to explore into, through truthful speech, articulate the truth. And again, it will set you free. Without which one might he says, without which one might end up asking where the bandits are who are not trees. Does this little then, which can become everything on occasion, perhaps deserve an explanation? What is this truth without which there is no way of distinguishing the face from the mask? Again, what is this truth without which there is no way of distinguishing the face from the mask, the truth from the simulation, and part from which there seems to be no other monster than the labyrinth itself? In other words, how are they to be distinguished in truth if they are all equally real? Lacan continues, here the big clodhoppers come forward to slip onto the dove's feet, on which, as we know, truth is born, and to swallow up the bird occasionally as well. And now he's going to quote from his interlocutor, his adversaries, what they're going to say in response to what he's saying here about the truth. He says, quote, our criterion, they cry, is simply economic, you ideologists. Not all organizations of reality are equally economical. Close quote. But at the point at which truth has already been brought to bear, the bird escapes, unscathed when I ask, economical for whom? Feel free to explore that notion. Let me know in the comments what you make of that. Lacan continues, things have gone too far this time. The adversary snickers, quote, we get the picture. Monsieur has a philosophical bent. Plato and Hegel will be showing up any minute now. Their stamp suffices. Whatever they endorse should be discarded, and anyway, if, as you said, this concerns everyone, it's of no interest to specialists like us. It can't even be classified in our documentation. So here he's saying that his adversaries completely dismisses of something like continental philosophy, right? Because he's talking in a time of really behaviorist, positivist mindset, right? Where this idea of any kind of fundamental notion of the truth or of any kind of metaphysics, the truth of the subject, authenticity, all of that was kind of being discarded for this kind of scientistic model that was emerging at that time. Lacan says, you think I'm joking here, but not at all. I subscribe to it. If Freud contributed nothing more to the knowledge of man than the verity that there is something veritable, there is no Freudian discovery. So Lacan is saying that the very event of Freud's discovery was that the truth of there being something true, the truth of truth. So that's why I said at the beginning of the video that this very atheist Freudian character was allowed to open the door for something like the logos to reemerge into the modern psyche. I'll read that again. He says, if Freud contributed nothing more to the knowledge of man than the verity, the truth, that there is something veritable, there is no Freudian discovery. Freudianism, he says, belongs then to the line of moralists in whom a tradition of humanistic analysis is embodied, a Milky Way in the heavenly vault of European culture, in which Balthazar and La Rothschild are among the brightest stars, and Nietzsche is a nova as dazzling as it is short-lived. Moving a little further, he says, its objectivity is, in fact, strictly tied to the analytic situation, which, within these four walls, within the four walls that limit its field, he's saying within the four walls of the analyst's office, can do very well without people knowing which way is north, since they confuse north with the long axis of the couch, assumed to point in the direction of the analyst. So this last section here, and I'm going to leave it there, he's going to say that psychoanalysis is in a sense the event of going to analysis is an event of going down into a hall of mirrors, right? Is exploring the psyche, is exploring the unconscious. Right about that, I had an unexpected visitor interrupt here, so let me just give you the quote. Psychoanalysis is the science of the mirages that arise within this field. Again, the field of the psychoanalysts' space there. A unique experience, a rather abject one at that, but one that cannot be too highly recommended to those who wish to get to the crux of mankind's forms of madness. For while revealing itself to be akin to a whole range of alienations, it sheds light on them. It sheds light on them. So here, Lacan is giving a defense of this type of psychoanalysis, and he's admitting that it's, like in a very Nietzschean sense, is a staring into the abyss being the mind of man, the unconscious, with all of its phantasms, its images, its falsities, right? It's staring into the abyss because while revealing itself, right, the unconscious, to be akin to a whole range of alienations, it sheds light on them. So searching for the truth, right, through speech and language in the psyche, sheds light on not only the unconscious forces that attack one's subjectivity through the neurotic complexes of the ego, it also sheds light on them, right? And in shedding this light, the truth, in some sense, comes in and is a healing event. It heals the psychic trauma, right? It releases this pent-up energy, which allows more well-being to flourish in the subject, right? So I'll leave it there for now. Again, thanks for listening. I think there's a lot more to be said. Again, I'm not trying to reduce any set of ideas to others, but I think there is a lot more to be mined here in this dialogue between psychoanalysis and ancient Christianity. So thanks for listening. See you guys next time. God bless.